Okay, so we're going to do a follow-up Onshape CAD tutorial where we're going to make the bottle opener that we've been making in the workshop, or you might have seen as an example. And the bottle opener is made up of a steel central part, a wooden outer handle, and then it will have a second wooden part on the outside or 3D printed part on the outside to encapsulate the metal component, the tang, the opener part of it. So we're going to make this as our assembly in Onshape. So we'll create our main components and then we'll bring them together as an assembly. I'm going to be quite quick about it because the videos will get quite long quite quickly. So remember, you'll need to pause and then carry out the activity or rewind and see whether or not you understand where I'm going with it. So don't just watch a video and then think you're going to be able to do it. You'll need to do it a step at a time. And obviously where the dimensions are given to you, you want to try and stick to those, but you know, as with anything, the better you get, the more you can deviate from the information I give you, and if it's slightly different, that doesn't matter, so long as you're understanding the method. So let's get started. So we're in Onshape. I'm in my Onshape, created by me. You can see a key fob if you just followed that tutorial, and we're going to go to create and document. I'm going to call this one bottle opener, and I'm going to OK that. Okay, so that opens up my workspace. So if you remember, what we're going to do is we're going to start putting sketches onto work planes. My work planes are front, straight ahead of me, right, which is left and right, and top, up and down. I'm probably going to work on the right hand work plane for this activity, because it suits me. There's lots of different reasons why you might choose something. Some things have a really obvious orientation. So for example, I've got a mug of tea here. That would have a very obvious top and a very obvious sides to me where I can show the handle. Other objects such as our bottle opener, not quite so obvious. So let's get started. I'm going to go to sketch. I'm going to choose the right hand work plane, and I'm going to right click and view normal to sketch plane. That means I'm looking straight at it. And then what I'm going to do is, do you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to change the name of this. Can I do that? To metal opener. This is the metal opener part of it. That's the sketch. Exited my sketch. You can see it's now appearing in the model tree, so I'm going to go back into it, edit, okay, and now I'm going to do the drawing part of it. So, line tool, I'm going to just draw. I'm actually not going to, if you look on Onshape, quite often you'll get constraints that lock you to a certain point. It can be really useful. I sometimes find that quite annoying, so I'm actually going to draw away from that and try and avoid a constraint. And I'm also not going to worry about my measurement for a moment. This time I am going to make my front line up with the beginning of that line. And what I did is I just hovered over it, and that locks those two into position. And then close that rectangle off. Okay. Now, I've deliberately not dimensioned it there. My kind of preferred workflow is often to actually do my dimensions afterwards, because I know I'm going to add them in a minute. So that was the dimension tool up at the top. I click on the line and then I drag up to place it. And I'm going to make that 50 and press enter. And then again, dimension tool, click on that line and drag out. I could alternatively click on that line and drag out, but let's do it this way. Click on the line, drag out, and click to place it. And that one is 25. Okay, so that's our piece of 3mm steel that we're using for our bottle opener. And into that, I'm then going to position the hole, which is used to form the back of the opener mouth, let's call it. And I'm going to use my dimension tool to dimension that at 8. Okay, now, if I'm honest, I haven't totally decided where the best sizes are for the mouth of the bottle opener. And how high up it's going to be. So I'm going to put some measurements on by clicking in the center. So I'm in the dimension tool, center and front face. and just pull that around until I'm, if you look, when I was first doing it, it was trying to give me an angle. I've adjusted it so it's giving me a horizontal one, and I'm going to type in 15, and then it's too high up, I can see that, so again I'm still with the dimensioning tool here, clicking in the center, clicking on the outer edge and dragging that out, and I think I'm going to make that 6. Okay, now to me that looks pretty good. That hole is going to be centered 6mm off the edge. It's an 8mm diameter hole, so that actually means that we've got 2mm here. That's okay. Now if I decided to change my mind on that, because I've put the dimension there, I can adjust it and try out different measurements. So it's looking too big there, isn't it? I think that 6 was pretty much where we want it to be. So if you were doing product development, that's really useful, isn't it? You can see how we've got those constraints and dimensions locked in, and we can make those changes as we're working on it. Okay, now I'm going to use the line tool, and again I'm just going to estimate that, and I'm going to right click and escape line. Now I could have pressed the escape button on the keyboard, I was about to do that. So that's going to be the little bit at the bottom that bites in under the bottle cap. Haven't really made my mind up. Again, when I'm doing these, I'm not quite sure that I've got a bottle opener absolutely precisely yet. I'd need to produce one and then test it. So now I'm going to the line tool, and I'm going to go to the line tool there and pull out the mouth of our bottle opener and click, and then escape out of that line tool. So I'm still in my sketch and I'm looking at this and thinking, does that look about right? So I've got a front piece that's going to act on the top of the bottle. I've got the hole in the middle there. I've got a little scoop at the bottom. That looks okay. That's not a bad size. But in order to allow me to adjust this a little bit, I'm thinking, where can I put my angular dimension here? And I'm going to choose the top of that line there. So I've clicked, remember I've got on a dimension tool. And now if I click that front line and sort of pull it around a bit, you can see I get various options about what it's going to show. And I'm going to click there, and I'm going to update that to 76. And we'll just fiddle around with that for a minute to see what moves. Let's try that at 80. That constraint is absolutely fine. Let's try 70. So it begins to cause things to jump around a little bit. I'm going to go back to, I think, 75 degrees. That seems to work out quite well for me. Now, if I look at my circle tool there, that actually comes in and doesn't totally line up. Now, what I can try is constraining it as a tangent. And a tangent means that if you've got a circle, it's, you know, and you put a ruler up against the circle, it's where it touches that edge and it comes off smoothly from that top surface. So let's see whether that will lock it in. Now, it might tell me it doesn't like it because I've got this angular constraint here at the moment as well. So it might say that it's over constrained. That would be my prediction. So that was my tangent tool. There's the circle, and there's the line that I want to pull into a tangent. That actually seemed to do that quite happily, and now where I had that little bump, it's pulled those two into position. I'm surprised that that didn't tell me that it was going to over constrain, but it didn't, so happy days. So there's the overall length, the overall width. The centre of the hole is 6mm up with a diameter of 8, 15mm back, 75 degrees there. That's a decent set of measurements that hold that in place, and I could manufacture that without any. What you don't want to end up with is lots of 0.5s or 0.83699. You want to get it kind of locked down quite nicely. So now that isn't a valid profile. In our previous one we've talked about a valid profile. I'm going to use the scissor tool now to get rid of all of my overlaps. Anything that's hanging out, because I just want one single outline. So the scissor tool will delete lines between other lines. And all being well, wherever we've got an overhang, we can remove it. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I'm just going to escape out of my scissor tool and try and delete that part there. Which worked well. Okay, so that's all constraining. There's the bottle top opener part of it. Now the next thing I'm going to do on this sketch, I don't like this sharpness. It's too sharp. It's quite dangerous as a tool. So again, you might have remembered on the 3D printed part that we did, we applied a fillet to the shape. I'm actually going to try and apply a fillet into the sketch. Sorry, it's over here. Sketch fillet. So before I do my 3D part, I'm going to actually put the fillet on here, and I'm going to click between the two lines, and it's giving me this radius there, which is too big. I'm going to change that to 2.5 and have a look at what that gives me. That's okay. Still a little bit strong. I'm going to come to 1.5. There we go. I think that looks much better now. Okay. Now again, I'm looking at this. That I think might need a bit of a shaping, because that looks quite dangerous to me. So let's go to the fillet tool again. This is only going to be a very small fillet. 2.5, way too big. Let's do 0.25, so 1/4 of a millimeter. Let's see if that works out. Okay, and you can see we've got a radius of 0.25 there. Just takes the sharpness off, keeps it safe. Okay, and I've still got that little ski jump part on the bottom of the bottle opener. I think I'm going to do the same thing up at the top here. I don't like that corner, it looks dangerous. Let's see if I can pull in. So I did it a different way that time. I don't know whether you noticed, sorry, I blasted ahead. I actually clicked on the corner of the 2 points and then pulled the fillet in, rather than clicking on the first line and the second line. It does exactly the same thing. It allows me to preview it and to change the size of it. Remember, this is web-based, so we have to go a little bit slowly, because sometimes it just takes a minute. Okay, and I'm going to change that to 6. Okay, so here's my metal part. I've got the scoop bit. I've still got an overall length of 50. My product is dimensioned quite well, so I'm going to OK that. So this is my sketch, remember, and because everything's dimensioned, if I find it doesn't work later on, I can go back into my sketch and edit some of those dimensions. Now what I'm going to do is to turn that into a 3D object using the Extrude tool, and remember, look, I can right click and access that as well. And we're working with 3mm mild steel. Okay, we're on new, it's a solid, so that's 3mm. Okay, let's come over to our appearance library here, and we will choose part 1 is going to be a nice sort of bluey grey colour. And green tick. Okay, and close that. So we've got quite a lot of options here for various things, but again, we're not going to get overly caught up in it. If I right click on part 1, I can also do something quite important. Let's just rename that, shall we? That's probably quite important. So up here I'm going to rename metal part. When you get into complicated assemblies, it's quite important that you actually have good names for components so that you can find them and you can work on them. So we'll call that metal part, and the sketch was called metal opener. The extrude is then the 3D part of it. I could rename that, but then it's just getting a bit tedious. Right, so that's that part finished. Now what we're going to do is create a second part, which is the wooden frame that sits around. Now, I'm used to doing it in other software where you do all the parts in separate documents and you bring it together. In Onshape, you actually will quite often draw in the same document. I don't like drawing it underneath it, although you can draw it in place. I'm going to draw this off to one side, but I'm going to use the right work plane still. I'm just going to come out of that a second because I'm going to just show you what I mean. Right, so there was our right work plane, that's our front work plane. We've drawn this on the right work plane. I'm going to still work on the right work plane for this. So let's come back to sketch, select that work plane. I'm going to right click, view normal to sketch plane. Okay, now I've got that part there. As I say, I'm not going to try and draw the two next to each other, but I'm going to use it as a bit of a reference. Okay, so rectangle. Let's go back to my dimension tool. Again, you could dimension it as you go. This is just my preferred method. I'm going to make that 70 for a minute. I think that's too big personally. And I'm going to change that height to 50. No, I'm not. I'm going to change that height to 40. Change that height to 30. No, I'm going to change it to 40. Press enter. What I was thinking of there is how wide we're going to make the space inside this. Okay. Now, again, although it's a sketch and it's in the same place, I'm actually going to go in the opposite direction with my extrusion on this part. So it's 70 wide, it's 40 tall. Remember, I can view normal to sketch plane if I get a bit lost. If I green tick that, then what I'm going to do is extrude it. Again, I can right click to extrude, or I can go to extrude here, click on the object. I'm going to go away from my products by flipping it here, and I'm going to make that 12. Press enter. Okay, now I'm going to make a new part out of that, because in our assembly that's two separate components. And then I'm going to green tick it. Okay. So, next job. Although they look like they're close together, they're not actually joined up. Might edit that out of the video. So now what I need to do is I need to create a space where the metal part goes into our wooden component here. So let's just rename that wooden component. Let's call it wooden handle. Press enter. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to go assign material. And I'm going to choose the material of doesn't want to do wood. I'm looking for wood. Douglas fir. Let's call it Douglas fir. Lost it. Green tick. Right. So that wooden part is made out of Douglas fir. That's quite important from a engineering and manufacturing point of view. You can see it doesn't actually update the appearance here. I'm going to update the appearance here, wooden handle, and we'll make it wood there, and green tick. Okay. As I say, one of the issues that I have with Onshape is that the rendering in process isn't very good. That's in order to make it web-based and very, very speedy. I think it's a bit of a limitation for what I always want to use it for. Now, I need to create a space for our 25mm handle to fit into. So I'm going to do a sketch. Now, up until now, we've done it on work planes. I'm actually going to do this sketch on the face of the object. View normal. And then I'm going to come out, making sure I'm coming out at 90 degrees. If you look, you get these little icons that appear. And that's showing me there that that's coming out perpendicular. That's coming out at 90 degrees. I'm going to come down 25 and then I'm going to come across to the front. Did that not click? And then I'm going to escape my line for a minute. I actually need another bit of a line. I'm missing that bit, but I just wanted to show you what I'm doing here. So that metal part is 25mm. So I'm going to dimension this line here at 25. Now, I haven't really decided how long I want this to be, so I'm going to dimension this line here. Let's escape that. It's trying to dimension something else. Don't at all. By 25. Okay, I think that looks about right to me. So it's 25 in, it's 25 up, and that's sitting inside this rectangle here. So we're going to want to actually dimension it from the top. So if I click that line there, and then click on the top, because remember we're doing the sketch on the face of this object, so I can use a measurement from it. If I turn that to 10, that'll move the entire rectangle down. Okay, now the next one, you go, well, hang on, how do I get this into the middle? We are going to have to adjust it according to the size of this object, or offset it. Final dimension here, 5 mil. Okay, so it's gone red. The reason for that is that what Onshape is saying, I don't want to be dimensioning all the way across, because one of them is going to start doing a tug of war with the other one. We're already dimensioned down, we're already dimensioned in that width there, so this one at the bottom is actually unnecessary. Now I think I can change it to a driven dimension, which has solved the problem. And what a driven dimension means is it's going to tell you how big it is, but it isn't going to start trying to force that rectangle anyway. You don't actually need that final dimension, but I wanted to show you that. If you have a dimension that's causing you a problem, you can right click on it and change it to a driven dimension, and that allows you a little bit of editing capability. So if that's 5 and that's 10, I'm going to just bring that up to 7. I'm trying to decide whether to go for 7.5 or to stick with whole millimeters, and I think I'm going to stick with whole millimeters, although that's annoying. So one of them is 7 and one of them is 8, but I think it makes sense not to start putting 0.5 mil, because we don't need to be machining that. The other option, of course, would be to allow a little bit of space on either side. I could say, right, okay, we're going to make an allowance of 0.5 millimeter on either side of the metal, and then I could take that, shave that millimeter off there, but that's not what I'm going to do. Now, remember, I created a line here, and a line here. I didn't do that final line. I didn't close it off. And remember, we talk about a valid profile. I've now started where that was. I'm going to click at the top of that. So in effect, I've created a square there. Let's just escape out of that line tool. Right, I'm conscious I've created lots of lines and done lots of talking. So all I did basically was, on that shape, I created a new sketch, line tool, clicked on the front, dragged out, click, dragged down, click, dragged across, click. Then I used the dimension tool to make that line 25 mil, which pulled that one at the same time. Then the dimension tool to make that line 25 mil. Then I used the dimension tool to make the distance between here and here 7 mil. And that gave me a driven dimension of 8 mil there. And then finally, to create the valid profile, I drew that line at the front here. Okay, so that's now a square. So I can OK my sketch. Now, what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to cut into my object. A bit of a technical error there. I was just trying to work out some methods. So if I jump around a little bit, it's because I've edited a part out of the video. So what I've got, just a little reminder to myself of where we got to. Sketch 2 is this rectangle sitting on the front here. Okay, so it's 25 back, 25 up, 7 mil down. I'm going to OK that sketch, and then I'm going to use the Extrude tool on that component to remove material to a depth of 3 mil. And I'm going to go merge with all, so it's taking it out of the part below it. Green ticket. Okay, so that's now created an aperture, a space where that will sit in our final assembly. Okay, so I've now got 2 parts. I'm not going to end up putting the final part on there. because time-wise it's just a bit tight. Okay, so now look, I've got Part Studio. Let's call this, rename, bottle opener parts, and then rename the assembly be open and assemble. Okay, so I've got an assembly. There's the parts, there's the assembly. Now, in an assembly, this is where you actually lock components together. I'm conscious that we've been doing this for about 20 minutes now, so I'm gonna whiz through this. Here are my parts in that tab. Here is my assembly. Now, my assembly automatically is going to help me bring components in. So if I go on Insert, it's going to look for the various bits, and I'm going to bring in my wooden handle first of all. Okay, and then what I like to do is bring one part in at a time. I'm going to click on that part. I'm going to click on Fix, and what that means is that in virtual space, that component is locked into position. It isn't going to move. Right, then what I'm going to do is bring my metal part in and click, and then I'm going to green tick there. Okay, so I've now got the two parts. Now I want that part to sit in there, but I can't just float it in and hope for the best. I've actually got to position it a bit more carefully than that, so I'm going to just grab it again. And again, because I'm working in a web browser, sometimes it just works a little bit slowly, which I find annoying. So I want to lock that into position based on this surface attaching to that surface. Right, so let's do that. I'm going to do a planar mate. That's two planes. Those are surfaces. They're going to make those two join up. So I'm going to choose that surface there. I'm going to just undo that so you can see that a bit more clearly. So planar mate. I'm going to choose this face here. Click. Then I'm going to rotate around, and I'm going to choose this face here and click. Okay, so what we've now got is those two bits are connected, but this object will move, and I need to lock that into position. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to choose that in there, click, and then I want it to jam up against that end there. So make those two meet up, click. Looks good, doesn't it? That looks like it's lined up. Now, is it connected properly? Is it all there? I'm dragging on it. So my final one, it's still moving. So my final thing I'm going to do, just give it a minute to stop, is I'm going to take this top surface here and I'm going to make it join up with that surface there. So let's do that. So we're still on planar mates. Click, that's selected the top one, and then you have to just watch out for your mate connectors a little bit. Make sure you're actually selecting the right bit, because they tend to jump around a little bit. And again, this isn't my favourite bit of Onshape. Just be careful that you're selecting the right surfaces, and then green tick it. Okay, again, what's a little bit weird, whilst it's doing its processing, it sometimes leaves things slightly out of position, so just click and wait for a minute sometimes. Okay, so that you can see there now that my metal component is connected to my wooden bit. I'm not sure why I've got a planar 4 not happy, but I'm now fully connected. Okay, I am constrained, and that's my assembly. Notice how the assembly is different to the parts. The parts are separate. The assembly is when it is all connected, and that will help us when we come to doing our technical drawing. But we'll do that another time. If we can get to this point, that's quite a good set of sketches, extrusions, and assemblies. And if you've got to that, then well done. and we will take it from there. Good luck.